Hello, thank you for joining me for this live. This is my second live this year, which is kind of crazy. I used to do a bunch of these, closed out 2021, and then 2022 just got super busy with tax season, with things on the financial planning side growing pretty rapidly, which has been amazing and awesome. But it meant that I got rusty with my live videos, and I've been scared to hit the record button. I recorded the first one last week, and I'm going to start making this a little bit more regular over the course of the summer. Today's topic is going to be about education and whether you're paying for education or investing in yourself with education is truly worth it. This comes up a lot. I see it a lot when it comes to student loans and college education and boot camps that you might be thinking about. And actually, one of my clients is considering making a career change into tech, and he's going to be exploring boot camp options and the cost and things like that. And his question was, well, how do I figure out how I break even or if this investment's going to make sense? And from the outside, just kind of thinking about this huge, big, monumental decision, it does seem like it could be really complex and really hard to calculate and come in on a specific number, but it's actually a lot easier than you think. It's just as simple as finding out what this actual cost is going to be. So you'll want to nail that down in order to have that clarity and understanding of, well, does this make sense? Does this education investment in yourself, is it going to pay off in the long run? And so you want to get pretty clear on that. You don't want those numbers to be vague or to underestimate how much that total cost could potentially be. Because what happens that I see, especially with college and these boot camps, is you get started and then you realize that it's more expensive and you haven't planned properly to actually finish the courses. It might be that you enjoy them, you enjoy the new knowledge and education that you're getting, but you unfortunately forgot to plan for the financial cost, the financial runway that you need, and actually to complete the coursework, the program, whatever it is that you're set up in. And so that's pretty critical. You want to make sure that you know what the costs are. You want to plan, make sure that you will have a high degree of success just in reaching that end goal. And so once we know that number, that's nice because it's a very concrete number that we should be able to find. Even if you have to round it a little bit, you should be in the ballpark. So we have that cost. And from that cost, that's where we can start to do some math to find out where the break even is and how much you would need. So one calculation that a lot of people forget to plug into it. So most of the time when someone's going full force into a full educational program, they might not be able to work. They might not be able to continue doing their full-time job. So that's a critical piece of the puzzle. You're losing out on that chunk of income for however long that program takes. So for a high school graduate right now thinking about going to college, it's not just the cost of college, but if you're not going to be working during that time period, it's the income that you could have made. Maybe it's 25,000, maybe it's 35,000. That's, I think, roughly where I was in the range when I was working full time out of high school and going super part time to community college. So basically, you take that income that you could have made, and that's lost income opportunities over 4 years. If you're going to be doing a traditional 4-year college education, if you're doing a boot camp, maybe it's 6 months. Maybe it's a whole year because you want to give yourself runway to actually get a job after you finish the program. So you want to factor these things in and always stress test them. Never think that the most perfect situation is going to line up perfectly for you, because although that would be awesome if it does, if it doesn't, you don't want to be caught having to make sacrifices and making changes of plans that are not going to help you finish that end goal there. So making sure that you understand that there is a cost of taking time to do this education, this coursework, because it's most likely going to mean that you're not going to be able to work during those time periods. If you're like me and you're like, nope, I actually need to work in order to be able to finish these college programs, in order to finish this boot camp. And so maybe it's going to take you a little bit longer, like it did for myself. And that's perfectly fine too. The nice thing about that is you don't have to worry about that lost income because you'll be earning that income along the way. That doesn't come into the calculation. What does come into the calculation at that point is if you do have to stretch out the program then, or stretch out that graduation date, well, that's potentially lost income that you could have made if your income is expected to be higher when you finish. And so most of the time when people go through these programs, one thing that I've considered up until recently, and I just decided it doesn't make sense, it's not going to make a whole ton of sense as far as payoff for me, is getting like an MBA or something like that. I'm a self-employed business owner. I'm not going to get any promotion with an MBA. There's not really any additional income I'd get from it other than possibly networking possibilities and just knowing different people and expanding my network, which I'm sure is valuable. But when I kind of run those cost estimates, it doesn't make sense. It's not going to increase my income versus the cost of what it would be for the MBA in my eyes, and the time that it would take away from my family and other things that are important to me. But for a lot of people, when you do decide to hone in on a program or something that you think is going to better yourself, a lot of times it is tied to income, or at least tied to another career path that you'd be more excited about or more happy about. And so with that additional income, that's also part of the factor. So in my case, it took me about 8 years to finish my college program because I was working full time and kind of doing the college thing part time most of the time. And what happened was my higher income that I could have potentially earned, and I did end up earning once I finished my program, that got delayed by 4 years longer than it would have possibly if I would have just cranked through the 4-year program and then started earning more right out of the gates. In my situation, it made sense. It made sense for me to actually set myself in the best possibility to finish my program. And there was that caveat that I had no clue what I wanted to do the first 5 years of my life. And so it wasn't until I kind of got focused and knew that financial planning was something cool and exciting I was looking forward to, where that all made sense there. So you want to factor in the cost, the time, and then that lost income possibility if you do have to forego income while you're working on your education and programs. So those are big pieces there. And then you want to know at least reasonably what that new income will be once you graduate. So in my situation, I went from earning about $40,000 working full time at a community bank to I think it was about $55,000 all in, just kind of right out of college, right? First official financial planning schooling. And so you can see just pretty quickly, just that's a $15,000 increase if you just do the straight math there. Well, that's pretty sizable, and that's just 1 year. These things compound over time. So that higher earned income potential, my income skyrocketed after that point is 65,000, 75,000, 85,000, and it's been going up. And so I wouldn't have had that skyrocketing or that potential for that income climb that I did if I hadn't finished my college education. So yes, it was painful to pay about $40,000 for all my college stuff that I had going on. I did have to take out student loans, but even with that, I can easily point to my income earning potential and the power of my income earning since then and say, well, yeah, this paid for itself in about 2.5 years or so. That doesn't mean that I necessarily paid off my student loans in 2.5 years, because there were still lifestyle things I was choosing to do. We bought our first house, we started having families and things like that. But the grand scheme of things, I was able to do more and have more options and possibilities because of that education I earned. So you want to know the cost of the tuition going into it. You want to know that time costs, any sacrifices you have to make in income while you're trying to do this program, and then what that new income is likely to be. And that's how you do the math there. You just start to subtract that new income and minus those costs and trade-offs. And then how many years will it take you to break even? And in my example, in my specific situation, it took me about 2.5 years from the new income that I would have never seen or dreamt about prior to finishing my education. And that's all you had to do for yourself as well. And so we'll use a different example. Let's say some of my clients who had done a boot camp, they were making about $40,000, I believe, before they started the boot camp. They did nothing but the boot camp for about 7 months. Started looking for jobs and things like that. So for 7 months, they were earning, it probably would have been about 30,000 or so, just kind of rounding up just to make the numbers easy. So they gave up making 30,000 for that first half of the year to do this degree that costs about 12,000, I believe, for them. So that's about $42,000 in cost. But then when they got that first job, it was $75,000 in income. So they made $35,000 more over the course of 1 year of their new career, 1 year after their program. And so that's easily going to pay itself off in that second year. So that's how this math in algebra kind of works out. And it doesn't mean, again, that they're going to pay off that full $10,200 or whatever it was for their program for that boot camp all at once. They could if they wanted to, because obviously their income was high enough to do that. But the cool thing about how finances can be structured is, like, you can take care of yourself and do the right things. Doesn't mean that you have to pay things off immediately. It just means that you have the option now and you have more control over, well, do you want to pay it now or do you want to pay that over time and start to invest and expand and start doing other things like your 401k, saving for a house down payment, saving for wedding expenses. And so that's one of the beauties of getting the education, increasing your earning power and your income earning potential, is because then you just have choices, right? You can pay it off, the education, really quickly, or you can decide to stretch those things out and make other lifestyle decisions. But typically you want to do the math, and as long as your income is going to be higher, it's usually not going to take too long for things to pay themselves off. Heck, even doctors who take out $250,000 in student loans, those things do end up getting paid back rather quickly too, if they wanted to, because of how high their income is. If you have $250,000 in student loans, but your income now is $350,000, well, the math is pretty easy that you'd be able to pay that off. You wouldn't be able to make $350,000 just out of high school. So there's a lot of math and just kind of simplicity that we can boil it down to. I think it's more than anything, it's the fear of jumping in, and then that fear of not landing that job, not getting that pay bump or that promotion or whatever it is that you think this education is going to help you with. That's really honestly where the true risk comes in. And I think that's where we try to make up the outs as far as, well, is this actually going to be worth it? Because it is going to take a lot of time. It's going to take a lot of sacrifice. It's going to take a lot from you to kind of shift. If you're not used to being in education mode, there's a little shift that has to occur in your thinking processes and having to do homework and things like that. So sometimes we try to make the cost of education to be more than it actually is when you think about the grand scheme of things, because we really just want to find an excuse not to do it sometimes. And so that's one thing to be aware of, is that you're going to have some mental games, and it's going to be an adjustment. If you're not used to education and going through normal schooling process, it is a change of adjustments that you'll want to be prepared for. But at the end of the day, the biggest cost and the biggest risk is you going through this process and not actually seeing that pay increase as a result of this education and new knowledge. And again, that's why I'm not going to be pursuing an MBA anytime soon. Is I had thought about it. I know other financial planners that have had it. I know other business owner financial planners that have it, and they still say it was valuable education for them. But at the end of the day, they didn't think that it increased their income. And for me, it taking time away from my family to not increase my income, not improve my family's life in any way, doesn't make sense for me. And so you just want to go through your thought processes on all these different aspects and make sure it all makes sense for you at the end of the day. Well, thanks for joining me, and let me know if you have any questions about this. But I think it's, now that you know, it's pretty self-explanatory how you can factor this in and calculate, well, is education going to be worth it for you?